Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Again, welcome to this section of the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host. Again, remember, that's Bruce Broussard, your host, not running for office. So therefore, we're going to really get into this business. In all due respect, we got a general election coming up, and we're going to cover those areas. And last week, we covered the local area here in the Multnomah County, city of Portland area, and we talked about those areas. We talked about those races, and we got some interesting races that are going to be happening in that arena. Got interesting city race between two black women, Loretta Smith and Joanne Bowman, who's running for city council. That's exciting. And we've got the auditor's office. There's another contest in Multnomah County. It's a very interesting race aspect of it. So we talked about those kinds of things, and we're looking forward to the general election and the runoff between not the runoff, but the election between Joanne Bowman and Loretta Smith. Now, what we're going to do in this particular segment, we're going to take it out. We're going to talk about some state issues. We're going to talk about the state elections and where we're sitting at this point in time, what we thought about the governor's race. We're going to talk about the governor's race a bit. I think that's going to be an interesting one. A lot of money is going to be spent. A lot of money was spent in the primary aspect of it. And then naturally there was the congressional folks that were running. We just happened to have a candidate to make sure that we talk about that particular piece. Very interesting candidate, because we got a multitude of parties now aspect of it. And California just got out of the whole issue of jungle primary. I thought that was interesting. And maybe he might give us a little issue on that piece aspect of it, and then I got my friend Scott here, who's been around, as you know. He's been in the Senate, and now he's got a new job. He's city recorder. He's a city recorder, city of Astoria. Awesome. Of Aurora?
Yeah.
Aurora. Yeah, I said Astoria.
If I was working in Astoria, I wouldn't be here.
Gee whiz.
A little bit of ways over on the coast. I like Astoria.
I was thinking about my fishing days over there.
Someone's got steelhead on the brain.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, but anyway, we're gonna rap a little bit about some of those things. We're gonna take advantage of his time in the legislature, and he's still there indirectly, so to speak, because he's communicating. He has to. He's representing a city now, and so consequently, he's got good contacts there. It's gonna be some neat things, and so anyway, we're gonna talk a little bit about the state aspect of it in Salem, and then we're gonna maybe give him a little time to tell us about Aurora for a minute.
Sure.
Because those small cities are really having issues, and I'm sure they've got some sort of an association to talk about things along that line. And then we're gonna, like I said, we're just gonna kind of chat about it that way and bring you up to date. And then from that point on, we're gonna be getting into the general election, and Scott will probably be around back here with me again, and we'll bring some of these candidates up and start asking them those questions, if you will. So with that, let me open it up first off with thanking you guys for being here. Appreciate that.
Thank you for having us,
Good.
Bruce.
Sounds great. Well, first thing, because I'm sure the congressman wants to hear a little bit more about what's going on. We'll let Scott just kind of maybe, why don't you share with us, Scott? You just got this new job aspect of it. What is that all about? Aspect of it. Let the public know about
the local
before
stuff.
we get into in this whole political arena
more
aspect
important
of it.
stuff.
What do you think?
Well, I went to graduate school and did that here in Portland
Okay.
State University, their Executive Masters in Public Administration program. Really enjoy that. Had the opportunity to come on and do some work for the city of Aurora. Really enjoying that.
Good.
And it's a lot like many of the small towns that I worked in and reported in over the years. So I covered city government in places like Rogue River, Cave Junction, Estacada, Gold Hill. And so I had a pretty good understanding of how things work at that level and kind of the small town politics. And a lot of it really is just small town problem solving.
Oh, is that right?
So I've been doing that for almost 3 months now. In fact, I just spent last week in Tacoma at the University of Puget Sound doing this Northwest Clerks Institute, but networking with people in similar positions from Alaska and Washington and learning records management and other things that I need to learn for this
So
position.
as a layperson, from the beginning, as a layperson, is this a mayorship type thing? Are you sort of a mayor type? Are you just taking recordings? Or are you just a high-class secretary? Or what's the deal?
So we're unique in that under the charter, the mayor's the city manager.
Okay.
But the mayor has a day job. So it's very similar to my last position where I'm working for an elected who has a day job. And in the meantime, here's the office, and you have to run the office while he's off doing his day job.
That's good.
Yeah, because there's not a lot of kind of entry-level city manager type positions. And I knew that was the profession that I wanted to gravitate towards, and I thought this would be a great opportunity. My girlfriend lived there, and so I can walk to work now.
Cool.
And I do when it's nice, but it hasn't been that nice
Good.
often.
Well, congratulations, Scott. Congratulations.
Yeah,
I mean,
fantastic.
I tell you what, I was just thinking about it. I was going to say that, well, I think Salem's going to miss you, but no, I think they're going to tap into you, because I know they are. I'm tapping into you too.
Some issues have already come up.
I
too,
figured that.
yeah.
I figured that. Okay, good. Well, with that, why don't we just get right into let's do a little overview of, from a national perspective, what's going on right now. As you know, Korea comes up real quick, like that. That's an area, that's a major area, and but maybe topping that off, let's talk about President Trump for a moment, and just kind of like a little history in terms of how we got there to begin with President Trump. As you know, the people were kind of like we were kind of looking for change. It was, a big change. Both houses just basically didn't come up with the kind of leadership. President Obama, he did his 8 years, which was good. I mean, if that was the top of diversity, I mean, wow, that was awesome. Got me? And he did the best job he could under the situation that we were into. And that's quite a transition. Then all of a sudden, boom, people were still asking again for change. What are we going to do now, if you will? But that was the big issue before President Obama got elected, to start with. And so now all of a sudden we've got, and during that particular time it was, hey, we want to, the brand was clean the swamp. Remember that piece? Clean the swamp. And then they still went around, and I thought the Republican Party they had a number of candidates that were vying for presidency. It was pretty clear that our dear friend Hillary Clinton, was basically vying, if you will, for the president on the other side. It was a one-way side, but Bernie Sanders was there too. But realistically, it was just Hillary. And so all of a sudden, you got this group of guys, and you got just one guy that's sitting out there by himself, so to speak, and that was Donald Trump from New York. And when we think about New York, what a major city. It's kind of like a little world in its own. You know what I'm saying? And he was there. He was one of the playmakers, if you will. So anyway, he got in there, and I'm just throwing this out there, and you guys let's get into the discussion. But he got in there and basically said, okay, fine, let's change the swamp. And I think, and just as a layperson, I think that's what he's been doing. I mean, he's been getting issues that a lot of folks have never, it's sort of been taboo to many of the folks who are in our Congress today. And I think it's good. I think it's good for the country. And a number of people that I found out, and having run this last time around, being knocking on the doors and this, that, and the other, they really didn't know what that was all about. They really didn't know the man. I mean, it was about the issues that we were talking about as a whole, and then naturally because of the difference, if you will, of the traditional kind of how we normally ran campaigns and this, that, and the other. We had a new day. The media was one side, and then he was the other. You had Trump on the one side of the media, and you had CNN on the other side. And I thought that was interesting. So you had a discussion on both of these ends, but the leading force was still the president of these United States. And I thought that was a very interesting piece. So with that, why don't we just jump right on in, okay?
So when it comes to national issues, and obviously this is just me speaking as a private citizen,
sure.
The two main things that I care about at that level are the economy and national defense. It's, do people have jobs, and are we being taken seriously overseas? And I think one area in which he's really turned over the table, so to speak, is in terms of foreign relations. And there's footage of him from as far back as the 1980s talking about these trade deals that had been worked out at the time. In fact, I think at one point he took out a full-page ad in the newspaper saying these deals are outrageous and they're terrible for the average person in this country. And so that's what we're seeing at that level. Now he's in Korea right now, or in Singapore doing that. I mean, that's an issue that's been kicked, that's a can that's been kicked down the road for most of my father's lifetime, and my father's well into his 70s. So if he gets to be the one to actually bring peace to the North Korean peninsula, I think, after the election, there was this kind of fear and hysteria from a lot of the folks who didn't support him, basically saying, we're all going to die. Well, here you are a year and a half later, and what do you have? The economy's booming. So that's half of what I care about, especially I drive around rural Oregon, small towns like the one that I'm working in. We've got Hubbard, the next town over. Every time I drive through there, help wanted signs everywhere. Last time I was down in Southern Oregon, same thing, help wanted signs everywhere. Towns like Grants Pass are booming for the first time this century. And as a young person, it's been a struggle. because I came of age right around the late 90s, the last time times were good, and then struggling through adulthood for the Bush administration and the Obama administration, trying to raise a family and sitting there with like $5 to my name at any given time.
During
yeah,
period,
during the closest thing we've had to
to
a Great Depression in almost 100 years. So, I mean, I feel more optimistic than I have in a long time. I see all kinds of investment happening in rural Oregon and elsewhere, the historic low unemployment rates, and I think that kind of takes care of a lot of your other social ills. It all begins with people having money in their pocket, which is why I think a lot of these other issues are a sideshow. You know, and you could try to talk about Stormy Daniels all day long, but here's the thing: if the average person has a job, has money in their pocket, and feels good about the future, they don't care, and they proved that during the Clinton administration.
Well, those
too.
are the issues that they were trying to address.
It's bread and butter.
It's the other end that basically brought that in. Let's bring Drew in here for a minute. Drew, by the way, happens to be a candidate. I mean, he's a candidate. And what district was that, Drew?
Oregon's first congressional district.
First
for the
congressional
U.S. House
district.
of Representatives.
And
yes,
the incumbent sitting in there right now?
that would be Susan Bonamici.
Susan Bonamici. Okay,
Yes.
fine. And I take it you are now going to be in the general election, right?
I am going to be on the ballot for the general election, but what's really interesting about my campaign and the effort we've been trying to put together is that for the first time there's been a co-nomination for a national race like this, with a co-nomination coming from vastly drastic third parties.
Okay.
Where I've received the nomination of the Libertarians and of the Pacific Green Party. And it's essentially just one of those campaigns where people are tired of the dialogue of where, as you know, like 3 or 4 days ago, ongoing like clockwork, there was another left-right brawl in my beloved city of Roses, and it hurts my soul to see that type of stuff. It really does. So a lot of this campaign centers on the very important notion of reminding Oregonians that we have a heck of a lot more in common with each other, however wide that gap may be, than any of us have in common with the political elites in Washington looking to advance their causes and entrench their parties at our expense. That said, I'm not going to be running a dirty campaign. I'm a nice guy. Susan Bonamici has conducted herself honorably in office, and I would like to conduct myself honorably in campaigning, because I think statesmanship is very important. To point of fact of what we were talking about earlier, the successes of Donald Trump have been very hard for a lot of my friends on the left to identify, largely because he wasn't very effective at endearing himself to them after he won the election. They still largely view him as much an opponent today as they did back during the election, and I think, point of cause, that's what's still feeding into these left-right riots. People with very, very similar sentiments who have grown up with different political language, and they've kind of lost the ability to talk to each other. But if you look at the tree of liberties that the Libertarians love and the conifer on the Pacific Green Party's logo, you'll understand how similar those sentiments really are.
By the way, what are the boundaries, if you will, of a district number?
Okay, in Portland, I have portions of Multnomah County.
Okay.
Starting at Burnside Street, westward, mine. Working its way southward, down to McMinnville, over through the areas of Vernonia, Scappoose, St. Helens, Astoria, Seaside. In my humble opinion, and I'm probably prejudiced, it's the most beautiful part of Oregon. I live on the Columbia River. I am blessed in more ways than I could ever imagine, and this place has helped with that.
Okay. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of like say now we got 3 candidates, and I'm sort of reminded of late. We've been looking at California, and they've got this. They came up with this brand jungle primary, so to speak.
The
top 2. I think it's
shaking up the status quo, and that's what I liked about Trump, is he wasn't afraid to go in and shake up the status quo and use the inertia created by that to really get results.
But now we got the top 3. We got the top 3 here in this race here now, because you got now who's the R on that end of it?
Oh my goodness, I don't even know. I don't even think he has a website up yet. I've been trying to stay apprised. Their primaries just came to an end. I'm going to be reaching out to both candidates and expecting their warmest ignoring.
Well, bring them
But
on.
yeah, I'll try.
Bring
I'll
them
try
on,
and bring
will
them
you?
out here.
Because
But
I definitely want to talk about some of the issues here in Oklahoma County, the largest county in the state, and then naturally the largest city. And when you start thinking about issues, I mean, if there are issues, they're here.
if
right
you
here.
could make sure I'm here, I'd love to be on camera with them at the same time.
John Zerbeek. Zerbeek? Does that ring a bell?
Verbeek.
Was that Verbeek?
John Verbeek.
John Verbeek?
Okay.
Okay, cool. There you go. There we go. So we got 3 candidates here now. So what we might want to do is that I'll leave it up to you.
Mm-hmm.
Give them a call and tell them we'd like to have them come on. Oregon Voters Digest. Can you do that?
I don't think I would make it through to Representative Bonamici's staff.
Well, that's when you call me.
Okay. So why don't we just skip ahead to that part, Bruce?
Okay. We'll just do it right off the bat.
I mean, I've met Bonamici, but that was once she was at the Capitol. I think she had served with my last boss because he'd been in the legislature when she was in the legislature.
Okay.
It was a good encounter,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think, that, I'm in the 5th congressional district.
Yes. Well, but anyway, the bottom line is that she is the incumbent aspect of it. And the main thing is that the people, the voters, want to know what are the issues, what are the issues, and how she's responding to those issues. As far as because that's where we are today. It's cleaning out the swamp, whatever's next.
Well, and nationally, the big push at that level is the Democrats really want to retake control of the House of Representatives.
and the presidency, big time.
Well, they're not there yet. The president won't be decided this time around, but their odds are better in Congress than they are in the U.S. Senate just because of the way the seats are, because there are a lot of seats up in states that were won by Trump, and some by pretty significant margins. So in order for the Democrats to get the kind of results that they want out of this election, they have to sweep pretty well across the board. And the polling, right, if you follow the numbers for whatever they're worth, I mean, they were pretty wrong for this last presidential election, right? But had them up on the generic polling, the generic ballot, pretty heavily as far back as February. But now it's about dead even. So that complicates things tremendously. But I don't think you're going to have the same kind of blue wave election that you did in 2006 and 2008 because I think people are feeling way better about things than they were back then. And in 2006,
From
Howard
an economic
Dean,
standpoint, for sure.
Howard Dean took over as head of the Democrats nationally, and he did the 50-state strategy. One of the things they did was they got a lot of moderates, they got veterans, they got a lot of pro-life type Democrats to run in districts that were good fits for them. But from what I can see of the primary results nationally, they kind of went the other way this time around. And it actually kind of creates opportunities for Republicans to either hold on to seats because they have a lot of open seats due to retirements and things like that. But it pretty well has to be a clean sweep across the board. And, in the special elections that they've had since the election, they've had some degree of success. But I think it all boils down to individual races. So Oregon's one of those states. Most of our congressional delegation, aside from Greg Walden, who's one of the most powerful members of Congress.
Who's a Republican? He's a Republican. The only Republican, right?
So for them, it's all about keeping their seats, but they're playing offense. So they're going to be looking to a lot of these other states that have seats that are being vacated by incumbent Republicans, trying to pick them off. Traditionally, historically, in the midterms, the party that's in power gets a shellacking. Right, and that's part of why the founding fathers put this all in place the way that they did, so that they didn't let one group of people be too powerful for too long. So it'll be interesting to see how that happens, but I don't see any way that the Democrats gain control of the U.S. Senate or do anything but lose seats in that chamber.
Well, I think the other thing too is, and I'll throw this out on the table, the creativity that Trump's bringing to the table. I thought that was a very interesting. That's why I made the point about the fact that, he's running. He's running for president now. I mean, as if to say, we got a presidential race going too. He's being creative, like the pardons for that matter. Look at the pardons that are coming out. Most of the presidents, it's at the end of their cycle that they start talking about pardons. But he's just bringing up some very interesting pardons, if you will, like Muhammad Ali and like Stewart. What's the gal that does all the cooking? What's her name?
Martha Stewart.
Margaret
The
Stewart.
one person who got in trouble for insider trading during the Bush administration.
But he's throwing that out on the table.
Yeah, we should be pardoning those people instead of the millions in jail for possession of marijuana.
Well, and he's going there too, apparently.
Yes.
So I've been
when he does, I will extol his virtues openly. But until I'm gonna try my best to shame him into actually doing it.
I was surprised that President Barack Obama never went there either. And what I heard from a lot lot of people was,
The
oh,
rest of
he's
them
saving
did.
that for an issue
Yeah.
for his reelection in
Yeah.
2012, and then he still didn't do it in his second term. And I think a lot of people were probably disappointed by that. But could you imagine if Donald
yeah.
Trump
Oh,
goes
yeah.
through and does that,
Wouldn't
what
that
the
be
reaction
the
would
largest
be?
mass pardoning, other than when I believe it was who pardoned the Vietnam draft eluders? I don't remember. Was that time?
But anyway, but
I
the
was born
point of
in
that
1980s.
is traditionally the presidents do this at the end of that.
Yes,
tour.
they do.
Okay,
And that's why I love the
But
outside the box
He's
thinking
doing
on it.
this thing outside the box now, and that's what I'm talking about, the creativity aspect of it. I mean, when this whole issue with the Korean deal, when he thought about it, he said, well, he was calling this guy back names, etc. At the end of the day, they're meeting.
Well, and they're all negotiation tactics, and I think that's, the last book I read was actually The Art of the Deal, which was a book he released in the 80s, and he talks about these things. And one of the principles is that don't be afraid to walk away from a deal.
Yeah.
And that's where, you've got all these trade deals like the North American Free Trade Agreement
Yeah.
that, have they been good for the average American worker? Probably not. Did they work out well for the average Mexican? Well, based on the immigration patterns we've seen, probably not. Maybe it's working well for the Canadians,
Yeah,
right? I mean, I haven't heard them complaining about it too much. But we've hollowed out our manufacturing sector. If you remember back then, a lot of the rhetoric was around post-industrial economy
Right.
because they had us convinced that everyone would be working at .com startups, and that sounded wonderful. But then the .com crash happened, and at the end of the day, you realize 20 years later, we still need to make things. We still have to have workers that are skilled enough to be able to make things, and that's where we're really missing out now, and why a lot of these jobs aren't being filled. But that's good for the average worker.
That's
You
good.
can already see it kind of pushing wages up
good.
because you get signing bonuses
Exactly.
and things that, I mean, a lot of the leverage is now going that way. I would rather see jobs looking for people than people looking for jobs, and I think that's where we're at right now.
And we can do that probably with those community colleges. I'd like to see something
Oh, yeah,
more creative
absolutely.
with the community college, because a lot of the so-called failure rates, a lot of these young people and adults are graduating from schools without the skills. And so now all of a sudden you got PCC and you got the community colleges that are acting as high school. Everybody's flocking over there, and in all due respect, so that's where the training can happen.
Oh yeah, you
Hold
could
it
be a
back.
welder and make really
yeah,
good
big
money
time.
and
And
not
you can
have all that much in the way of student loan debt compared
that
to
training
going
together
to a
and-
four-year
The thing is
university.
a lot of
follow.
these vocational programs
Yes.
used to be available to kids at a much younger age. I know back when I went to high school, I had a very dear friend who, through the local vocational effort, found himself an ASE certified mechanic in brakes, engines, transmissions, and he was 17.
Yeah.
He owns his own shop now. So I think it's very important that we teach our kids and the honor, the nobility in using these two hands to create your work. When my dad was the vice president of ER Advanced Ceramics back in northeastern Ohio, I didn't really grow up knowing that job differences carried hierarchy because everybody helped everybody else out at the company. We didn't have one function where they all kissed his butt once a year. We had bunches of meetings where their families would come to our house or we'd go to their house. Everybody working together towards a common cause with nobody needing to be put above anywhere else. I think that's the overwhelming sentiment that made America great, with all respect to the president's
It
opinion.
was the American dream, and I think we
Yes.
kind of lost sight of that the last 20 years. This notion that you should be able to have it better than your folks. You get a solid foundation and you move on from there. And that's
that
really
said,
hard
you
to
don't
keep.
deserve to, based on anything other than these two hands, your mind, the sweat of your brow, the ache of your back, these intrinsic intangibles that define success. We need to reward hard work, and I do think at his base sentiment, the president, that's very important to him. I'm not going to be disingenuous and think, he's wanting to trash everything just because he's a member of a different political party than I'm going to be representing. That said, I think he would do very well to put a little bit of the very successful attention that he's paid towards the economic issues that have been plaguing our country for the past 2 years to this point, but ingratiating themselves to his political opposition, because at the end of the day, we all rest our heads in the same nation. Push comes to shove, worst case scenario, we're going to find ourselves back to back defending ourselves with Democrats at our back, other libertarians, Greens. At the end of the day, we are Americans. And I think that is Trump's only failing, is if he was just a little bit more mannerly and a little bit more of a statesman, a lot of liberals would be able to appreciate the effectiveness of outside of the box, smash the box, heck with it, I'm going to stand in a couple box thinking, because the status quo isn't working.
And I think he gets better with that over time. I mean, when he first took the presidency, he was still doing the tweets all the time and picking fights with celebrities.
But that's okay.
And
that is the cost of not electing a career politician, and I'm fine with that.
The other thing, but the point you guys are making, and I'm listening to what you're saying, we're all creatures of our exposure.
Indeed.
If you just accept the person for what it is, but focus on the issues that he brings to the table.
But it did become about personalities. That whole election was more about personalities.
That's what I'm saying.
Issues.
But the concern of the population was about the issues.
Oh,
the
hugely
issues.
so.
And but again, because of our capitalist society, for every gain there's a loss, for every loss there's a gain. That's a fact.
Well, and you're right in that he's still in campaign mode. He still goes and does rallies, and the slogan has changed from "Make America Great Again" to "Keep America Great." And I think the implication of "Make America Great Again" and why that worked as a slogan is because I think people got the impression that the American dream was slipping away from them. And so it said it without saying that, hey, we're not as well off as we could be. Now, I wasn't around for the Jimmy Carter years, but I see a lot of parallels there where America was in kind of a malaise, right? The economy wasn't doing great in terms of national defense. We weren't looking too good on that stage either. And here comes this guy who's kind of an outsider, who has a different approach. And from what I understand, from what I can remember, from what I've been told, they treated Reagan kind of the same way. Right? Made fun of him. Oh, what's he know? He's an actor. Well, he came and he actually delivered, and there was kind of a revitalization of the nation and the American dream. Because at the end of the day, it's all about homeownership. It's all about entrepreneurship, and it's all about the American dream and the extent to which the average person can live it.
And the other thing I might add, I'm going to throw this out on the table aspect of it, is that, we have a well-read society, but a small section of our society at another level, if you will. And as a result of the advent of this,
they invented the telephone a long time ago.
Yeah, but my point is that, we got more people at the table now and responding to a lot of the issues. They know more about the issues. You can Google it anytime you want to. So the name of the game, things are changing, and I think we're in a very progressive kind of a town. I mean, a lot of things are happening. Okay, so now
remember at a time, Teddy Roosevelt was considered progressive, and look at all he did for our economy, for overall, I mean, the ecology.
So I think we're fortunate. We're not blowing one another up again. We're not on the walls and this, that, and the other. The fact of the matter is, we're negotiating. We're dealing with it. We're sitting up here talking about this thing, and we need to be thankful for that. Well, we got about another 2 minutes before we break, but I wanted to get into this other issue of race, which is a major issue in our country. We recognize it at this point in time. He put it out there on the table. The percentage-wise, it talks about 50-50, half and half. But I want to just chat with a little bit about some of the things that have been happening of late as we go through this transition. So why don't we just go on and take a short break before I get into this major issue. All right, guys? Let's see if we can take a short break, and then we'll be right back with you. Okay?
You are watching Oregon Voters Digest. This program can be seen again on these channels on these dates and times. Tell a friend.
Welcome back, folks. Again, I'm Bruce Broussard, your host here at the Oregon Voters Digest. Again, like I said, we're talking about politics so we can get ready to get into the general election and some of the major issues that's facing this country, our state, and our various communities around the state of Oregon. Okay, so now for those of you who missed it, you got the credits on the front end, and you can get back to us. We are on YouTube and this, that, and the other. And we do replays. You got the schedule and all, so you can get back to us. But let's get right back into where we were. We were talking about, from a national perspective, we were talking about President Trump. I mean, he's always the headline issue every day, 24/7. Okay, thank goodness for our media. He's on one side, and the other folks are on the other side. CNN on one side, and President the president is on the other side. Okay, President Trump. Okay, good. So we were just getting ready to get into another issue that's really is a major issue in our country. We have to resolve it, and I think why not take the opportunity to do that? And so the issue of race is an issue.
So the three of us are going to solve it right now.
You're doing right. I mean, I've already done it. But, so we're doing it right now. My point is that some issues just came up that I thought just throw out this. Recently, as you know, Roseanne Barr was an issue aspect of it. She brought the issue up of race, sort of a new show. And I still think about some of the old shows that were there during that particular time.
We were enjoying watching the new season of Roseanne.
Yeah. But the key is that it's a major issue. When you got 50% of the population that doesn't take it as a joke, that's a very serious piece. We got to relate to this piece.
Her particular comments weren't necessarily.
No, they weren't a good one. They just weren't a good one.
There's reasons people got mad about that.
But the fact of the matter is, you know, when one says race, the first thing that comes to mind is a person of color, black. And then, as a result of the whole issue of immigration and the sanctuary city things and this, that, and the other, all of a sudden it's the brown, i.e., Mexicans. We got Mexico abuts us naturally, and you know they're right next door aspect of it, and that's another issue in itself. But the fact of the matter is, when she talked about this issue, and was basically made several remarks, she brought up another person to the table. Besides just the brown person and besides the Mexicans and the blacks, she brought up the Jews. And as you know, we've always had this issue about the SWAT sticker and this, that, and the other along that particular line. That's always been there. But she brought up those three issues. And I thought it would be it was sort of interesting. When I first saw it, I started thinking about solutions. And I said, what if we sort of change the point person for a change? Rather than it be the black person that's talking about the issue of race to start with, let's use the Jewish person to talk about the issue of race, because they also have an issue that needs to be brought to the table to resolve that issue, and then you got, like I said, we right in the middle of the whole issue of immigration aspect of it. So we got these three factors aspect of it. But I think it would be sort of not necessarily refreshing, but solution oriented. I'm looking for solutions aspect of it to bring this issue to the table, so we can just say, okay, fine, because we're all indirectly a one of a kind, if you will, in this country.
Oh, indeed. And, so the individual has always been the smallest minority.
Oh, very much so. So the whole idea is that was there, and I was wanting to throw that on the table because that's a very interesting issue and how it was handled. And if you notice that when that issue came up with Roseanne, immediately they thought about blacks, and immediately all of a sudden the commentators on the news shows were black again. And then they became commenting. It wasn't quote like dealing with the other issues anymore. You got me? And so I'm just saying that it's an issue. I think we're going to resolve that issue. Again, thank goodness to President Trump in many ways, because I can still remember when he brought the issue up when he was going through his campaigning aspect of it. There was a black gentleman that was walking up in the campaign aspect of it, and he was walking up the stairs, and an older white gentleman just hit him up, just basically cold cocked him.
They're buddies now, though, right?
Yeah,
I watched a story about that the other day, that the guy had his court date, and they showed up, and they shook hands.
About nasty
Trump
stuff.
Yeah, I've had enough of that.
Trump put that together. And in fact, you can get it on Facebook. I mean, it's there. So my point is that, let's just really get down and take advantage and solve this issue within this 4-year cycle. That's what I'm looking at.
Well, and as you know,
any comments?
Mitch McConnell canceled the August recess for Congress, saying we have more work to be done, and immigration is one of those issues that's on the table.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about something where they've been kicking the can down the road for decades.
Yes.
That's been it. But can you imagine if they actually come up with some immigration reform by August?
Yes.
That's going to be huge, because I think, you're right. A lot of times those issues get discussed in terms of race, but we were talking about before the cameras even started rolling here, the issue really is border security. The fact that we have a porous southern border, the fact that we have all kinds of drug trafficking happening, the fact that the vast majority of methamphetamines that come into the United States come in from the southern border, from a handful of super labs that are in Mexico. You see the opioid epidemic that we've been having. A lot of the heroin comes from down there too. That's the approach that we should be taking. Border security, drug trafficking and sex trafficking, you know, and if you shore up that border, there's a lot you can do to help those issues.
But
and
at
even
the same time,
criminal gangs consisting of foreigners like MS-13.
yeah.
Yep. Drew?
The main issue is not allowing people with agendas to log jam these issues as riders upon each other, to allow us to discuss them separately. When we start able to discuss immigration reform, and it's needed, it's, you know, I come from a family of immigrants, and I don't
It shouldn't
see
take
any
somebody
Native
years and years and
Americans in here,
years
so
to
we all
get
do.
citizenship if that's what they want to do
Yeah.
and they want to do it properly, but that's what it takes. So let's streamline that process. Let's
Indeed.
simplify that process.
Give
Let's,
the states involved more control over their own process. You know,
But get back to this other issue of race. Very serious race aspect of it. In those two categories, we got the whole issue of we're faced with a number of issues right now in the general election of Sanctuary City. You get me? Yeah, okay. And again, the issue of race is always on the tube every day. I mean, you know, we still got even when I was running for office, that was a major issue in the county about institutional racism. And hopefully the county is going to deal with this issue.
it is the 14th Amendment issue of our
yeah,
time.
yeah. So we need to talk about it.
We need to, at least at a level of public administration, exercise equal protection of laws. There are those with very valid accusation that perhaps we have not been doing this as equitably as we should be. We can do better. We should do better.
Because our relationship now with Jerusalem, i.e. with Israel, is kind of a very positive situation. But in this country, it's an issue. It's still an issue with reference to race.
I think a lot of that stems with their significant advantage over the Palestinian people that they've been in conflict with for so long, and the fact that I you know, not from there, but the sentiment coming from the region is that we should have better friends, or we should expect more out of our friends. I mean, the United States of America used to be the, you know, I keep everybody safe from the bullies. And anytime you have enemies of your nation, or even friends of your nation, that might not be following that ethos, we as, you know, to maintain our moral high ground as the United States of America, I believe we're going to have to talk to these people and say, you guys can also do much better. And while they're about it, it's the Holy Land. It should be the most beautiful, peaceful place on earth. So everybody can do a lot better. And I think if we all stop fighting long enough to roll up our sleeves and set our minds to the solutions, you know, even if it requires going out of the box and ruffling a couple feathers like our president has done, so be it.
So we have to deal with the issue. And I think about the two major parties. Now we got the third party, if you will. You got me?
The third parties. I'm the universal alternative.
There you go. You know what I'm saying? So the key is that when you think about it from a historical standpoint, the Republican Party was sort of took the leadership, if you will, on the whole issue of race as it relates to African Americans. I mean, they were the lead, and to this date,
Starting
I mean, they're constantly identifying the other party, the major party, the Democrats, that they are. But then on the other hand, how involved do they get in this issue?
I think here's one of the dynamics that I've seen come up.
Lincoln Republicans.
A lot of the issues that they talk about in terms of race are couched in terms of victim, villain, and hero.
Okay.
Which is essentially, okay, here's these people that are super, and it's a take on classic Marxism, haves and have-nots. You are a historically disadvantaged group. Here's these group of folks over here that are well off, and I'm your champion, right? And this card has been played for decades. At some point, if you're those folks, you say, so if I'm disadvantaged and you've been my champion for 40 years and I'm still disadvantaged, then how's having you be my champion working out for me? And to the extent that you can answer those questions, but if you don't have a good answer, it's just give me more power, give me more power. It says, but we've been there, we've done that, we gave you power, and you're telling us that even though you had all that power and you're my champion, that here I am all these years later still disadvantaged, and it isn't working.
Well, hey, as you can see, folks, it's on the table. It's going to be on the table here at the Oregon Voters Digest, and hopefully I'll contact the Jewish community, and maybe I can get someone to come on the show, and we can talk a little bit about that peace aspect of it. And the same thing, in all due respect, with the I even interviewed, if you will, some of the key folks on the Republican side who's basically pushing the initiative of repealing the sanctuary state situation.
Actually, an a Palestinian show would be an interesting one.
That'd be good.
For you
oh
to
yeah.
put on.
I'm
They can
going to
discuss
contact
their region, because
Yeah.
that level of conflict has got to impart some sort of perspective. I can imagine.
Well, and that's been an interesting dynamic too. The fact that you see the United States agreeing to put its embassy in Jerusalem,
Yeah.
And what the reaction to that has been. And what we saw at the end of the last administration was Israel becoming increasingly isolated, because you had nations like Egypt, that had been an ally of ours, become a failed state, replaced by leaders who are hostile to our interests. In Libya, you had a predictable, contained regime, right? They'd get out of line ever so
Yes.
often under Gaddafi, but we knew what he was doing. He was stable. he
He'd
was
draw a line in
predictable.
the sand, we'd go flick him in the nose and tell him to behave himself, and he would
And he
for
would.
about a decade and a half.
That's a failed state now, and for as much as you hear nowadays,
Well-
right? People talk about the evils of slavery. The United States
Thank
was one of the
Hillary for
first,
that one.
right? One of the first nations to end it. But slavery is alive and well in Libya right now because it became a failed state under our previous administration.
Which is egregious if you really think about it. When the United States was first formed as a union, and we were basically looking for another nation that had been recognized to look at our charter and accept it, the French said, yes, we will, but we will not go first. It was actually Tripoli, the Treaty of Tripoli, back when we were dealing with the Barbary pirates. So our national history is in a way tied to Libya. So,
A lot of history.
yeah.
A lot of history, but again, it's unfortunate. But we still have that. We're still dealing with that history within the boundaries of the United States of America.
Indeed.
And that's the issue that we're talking about right now. We're all Americans, and 50% of our 50%, we're divided. We're still divided on who is an American, who isn't. Basically, who signs the check. See, so I'm just giving it sort of a lay aspect there. But anyway, it's going to be an issue we're going to talk about. It is an issue, and the only way you can maybe get down to the point of resolution, you got to talk about it. We're just going to be very open about this whole piece. Okay, that's the other area that I wanted to talk about. Another one is that we should, and then I was thinking about Senator Merkley just recently was on the tube talking about the whole idea of the separation of mothers with their children in regards to the immigration aspect of it. I never thought about that piece, because the whole idea that folks are coming in illegal with their child, if you will, and then at the border, right? And then they're basically putting them in and whatever, and then basically setting up the trial dates.
Senator
and this, that,
Merkley
and
wants to run
Well,
for
where's Merkley?
president in
he wants-
2020.
Yeah, Merkley wants to run for president. That
So
is a fact.
a few months ago, I think it was around last summer, when Oregon was on fire, like most of it.
Yeah.
He wasn't here in Oregon. He was over in Iowa, which is one of the first primary states, talking to those folks about global warming. So, okay, well, here's all these CO2 emissions coming from your state because it's on fire, because these forests haven't been managed for decades. So it was a publicity stunt, and it worked because he got his publicity talking about that issue. And, we shouldn't have families being separated at the border, but what you've had up until now is a situation that people have basically taken advantage of our lack of border security. And I think a lot of these unaccompanied minors were exactly that, unaccompanied, showed up at the border and their parents weren't there. So I think it's kind of disingenuous for folks to make it sound like the whole family gets to the border and we're deliberately separating the kids from the parents. I think they're showing up at the border
I
already
agree.
unaccompanied.
Yeah, the difficulty where it kind of, I'm conflicted, and a lot of these issues are highly conflicting, and adopting an absolutist perspective either way is it's horrible, kind of, because it doesn't allow any dialogue. When my family immigrated on my mother's side from Germany in 1907 into New York City, and my father's side from Hungary in 1857, the process was fairly simple. You made it off the boat, you're on soil. Congratulations, you're an American. Sign here, and sign here. Go forth and be prosper. The rules aren't the same now. And if for no other reason that neither are the colors, I think we need to have a better talk about it, because when my ancestors immigrated to this country, it was under a completely separate rule set than the people now are. And you're going to hear this a lot from me. We can do better.
Yeah, I think we can. It'll be interesting to see Congress try to take this up.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you know, I think the optics of that look decent, especially if the Republicans are trying to retain control of Congress, because if they don't, then the talk's already there. Impeachment, impeachment, impeachment. That's going to be kind of the top of the agenda, isn't solving these problems that have been there for decades. It's, we don't like the president, we want to impeach him. We say, for what? Well, we don't like him, let's get rid of him, let's get him out of there. But what the Republicans are going to do, and you can already see them doing it, is they're taking Nancy Pelosi and they're kind of putting together her greatest hits, and they're going to make this kind of a generic ad in all these swing districts to remind folks and say, hey, if the Democrats win the majority in Congress, she's going to be your Speaker of the House. I could see them doing that strategy coast to coast.
Yeah, yeah. Might add also,
Well, why
too,
not? Controlled opposition campaigns work.
again, I might add that too, that, you know, again, like we've been trying to focus again more on Oregon, because, you know, you got a national, so we've been kind of like mixing it up a bit, but
I
that's
love
good.
mixing it
That's
up.
good. But the whole idea about, again, the one last point about would like to be President Merkley, President Merkley, is that we've got a major foster care problem in the state of Oregon. Very major.
So you want to talk about the
care.
governor's race is what I'm hearing.
Yes. Now let's jump right up in there. And so my point is that if he was just spending a little bit more time on Oregon's issue about the separation of kids with their parents and whatever, I mean, Oregon would be the first thing. Show me something, please. Come on the show and talk about the piece. Okay, let's talk about the gubernatorial race here for a minute. We got quite a campaign going on right now, and we're going to have quite a race. What do you think?
So the Republican Governors Association, for months, even when the Republicans were duking it out, by which I mean really duking it out,
dukings it out,
physically
yes.
in the primary, they were taking out ads attacking Governor Brown. The rule of thumb is that if you're an incumbent governor and you're at 50% approval or above, you kind of coast to re-election. And her, according to the polls that they had and that I've seen, her approval went from above 50 to down to more like 43%, which means she is vulnerable. And obviously, Representative Newt Bueller ended up getting the nomination. And that was interesting, too, because he has been very critical of President Trump. He's moderate, but he still won with almost 50% of the vote. So in terms of his fundraising and in terms of everything else, it'll be an interesting dynamic to see because, you know, he's a Rhodes Scholar. He's done good work in the legislature, hasn't always toed the party line in terms of votes, has been representing a Democrat district that the other guys are going to try to pick up here, you know, in this next election cycle. He's articulate, and he isn't going to say or do anything that's going to embarrass the party or anybody down ticket from him. So as far as standard bearers go, the Republican Party could do a lot worse. And to his credit, he actually called me back. We had this issue come up within days of me starting this new position. We were told that the State Building Codes Division was going to issue some emergency rules. We're going to make it really hard for small towns like mine to issue building permits. Right, and the timing of this is horrible. You say things are...
Well, they need the housing crisis to be even bigger so they can ask us for even more money
again, that's
and even more
major
control.
Issue aspect of it.
And he didn't have to call me back,
This
but he
housing
did.
crisis was engineered when the urban sprawl legislation that they thought they were going to fight urban sprawl back in the 90s. So, boom, we'll just stop growth. That'll solve it.
What about the turnout, guys? What about the turnout? We had one of the lowest turnout here in the state of Oregon.
Well, some people warned about that back when they started doing this automatic voter registration, because the fact of the matter is, it's not difficult to register to vote in Oregon, and it wasn't before this law was passed. And that's what a lot of us in the legislature were saying at the time, was you're going to automatically register people who won't take the 5 seconds to go online to the Secretary of State's website and register themselves to vote. So guess what? A lot of these folks did not turn out. We predicted that.
We did, but what was not predicted, interestingly enough, this is kind of come proxied to a Minor Party Fairness Act that the Secretary of State has been putting down. There have been actually drastic unintended consequences from the Motor Voter Act, which has led to a hugely drastic increase of non-affiliated voters. Oregon has some of the highest non-affiliated voter numbers in the state, which has also led to both the major Democratic and Republican parties to lose unprecedented amounts of people due to this process. third parties haven't fallen off a bit.
But then at the same time, when you start thinking about it, just on a basic, just from a lay standpoint, we're all, every one of us, at one point in time, were more conservative than liberal. And then it changes.
Yes.
We're all the same. That's why I like this idea of this jungle primary thing. I really think that's going to be a neat idea.
I love the shake-up.
I think it's going to be a neat idea. It's a good shake-up aspect of it. And people have to deal with issues. Because like I said, here we are trying to relate the issues. And then some folks might say, well, I don't like what Scott said because he didn't talk about this. And what about this? And what about this? The issues are the issues, and we're going to all have to address them, and we're going to vote on them. But when you think about the affiliated voters, like you said, the numbers are really going. No one wants to identify specifically with a respective party. You can't do that.
Well, and that's the thing. A lot of the primary election, the point of that is for the major parties to choose their candidates. So if you're one of these people who deliberately decided you did not want to belong to these major parties to select these candidates, there's a lot less for you to vote on than there is for somebody who is a partisan.
What do you think about capping a fundraising aspect of it? Like the county, Multnomah County came out with this deal about $500, max, if you will, for fundraising aspect of it, as opposed to getting big business out of that's a campaign going on right now, if you will.
I'm all for campaign reform. I do think Oregon is one of those states where the possession of money is oftentimes confused for the right to speak or be heard. I don't think that speech is money. They are independent items, but at the same time, if you start dictating terms like this, once again, it's a slippery slope. Anytime you're faced with a slippery slope, you always lean to fall in the direction that is going to protect the rights and liberties of the people, and when possible, expand them. Getting back to the voting and the plurality that kind of has existed within our state, and people not wanting to carry association with those parties, I think it's largely come to do with the fact of they don't even seem, to a lot of people, this is my mischaracterization, they just don't even seem to represent what they used to represent anymore. I mean, you look at the Democratic primary, and it's definitely not about the consent of their voters, because if so, there'd probably been a completely different person that Trump would have had to face.
Who wasn't a Democrat, by the way, and
he was
it never was.
Indeed.
Yeah, and they're going to try
Against
to tighten
basically
up those rules.
two box wreckers, which I like box wreckers, against each other would have been a much better race than what we got. We can do better.
Well, and in Oregon, the rule is that you can raise unlimited funds, I think especially at the state level, but disclosure requirements are really stringent, and they get more stringent the closer you get to the actual election itself. So there's kind of the caveat. The penalties are severe for not disclosing.
But you've eliminated other ideas, though.
I'm curious if you guys had a perspective on how much money do you think would be a fair amount for someone to run on to receive the nomination of a political party?
Well, I'll do it this way.
Because I got the nomination of two on less than $35.
Okay, right. Now, let me put it this way. I think Dan Meek, and there's a small group of guys, Kafori and several of those guys that are basically leading the charge, if you will, in this whole issue, the campaign finance reform. And they started out with the county, and 87% of the people of the county supported that. 87%. And then there were some other folks that didn't like the idea. And when you looked at the 87%, these were just the little people, because the ideas were not being brought to addressing the issues.
The most vulnerable people, the one that really matter.
That really matters. So now they get ready to go to the city of Portland. They basically run the campaign. I've had them on the show on a number of occasions, and I would suggest that for those of you who are looking and if you want to join in that discussion, go to the inventory, the historical inventory, and you'll see the Dan Meek and I'm having that discussion, and they just go through it. You got some ideas?
Well, I think folks will remember, and you will too, that Portland didn't experiment with public finance for their campaigns, and it was a disaster.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lady who was a candidate, and if I remember right, she was hiring her daughter to do some work for her campaign, and she ended up losing and owed the city all kinds of money. I think she's since paid it off. But she ended up moving out of state and was working as a reporter like in Idaho. So their test run on that wasn't good. And I'll also say this. big money doesn't always necessarily win elections. For as much talk as you had after the Supreme Court ruled on Citizens United, a decision that is deliberately mischaracterized, I think, by a lot of people,
Yeah.
if big money won elections, Donald Trump wouldn't have gotten out of the primary. There was all kinds of these political action committees in
But he did have social capital in
He
the form
did.
of being a television star
Yes,
and one of the
yes,
biggest
yes.
names
which is why he
in
was able to
American
overcome
financial
In
it.
New
real
York.
estate.
Because even in some
in
of
New
these
York. In New
Yeah.
York.
well, nationally, I mean, like I said all along, that
media
whole cycle.
mogul of that area.
Right.
He was there every day. Okay.
Yeah, he's been world famous my whole
You don't
life.
finish top 3 with that.
That's right,
in your,
buddy. That's right.
That
Right.
feather in
But
your
in a
cap.
lot of the early primary states, he did not have much of a ground game, and people criticized him
No.
for it. But he didn't need it. He already had his
He was
name
definitely
recognition.
the outside guy at the beginning.
But
so-
if Big Money would have won the primary, then the nominee would have been Jeb Bush. Because all the
True
super
that.
PAC money was going to him. And if Big Money won the general election, Hillary Clinton outspent Donald
but
Trump
today-
tremendously.
but today-
But
that's an
that
issue.
to said, in primaries, it can help load primaries a lot.
Yeah.
I think, and this is a great discussion. Don't get me
Oh, yeah,
wrong.
oh,
I'm
yeah,
almost
oh,
afraid
yeah.
to lean too far one way or the other, and
Okay.
for fear of offending anybody else away from the table. But this is definitely one of those conversations that we need to have: is at what point does George Soros or the Koch brothers or any fair person that you could levy and say, hey, maybe they've had a little bit more than their fair share of influence on everything, with, the other side of the argument, which is, well, no, I worked hard for this money, and if I want to take and use it to back this person, definitely a
Well, let's
fascinating
cut it short. I
subject.
got about a minute. Let's come up with a close.
Well, and I'll say this too, because there were a lot of races where the Senate Republicans and the House Republicans, the caucuses, and I'd worked for the House caucus for a while, took sides in the primary, and the people that they supported and threw money behind either didn't win or barely won by really, really thin margins. So beyond a certain point, especially in these state races, it's diminished returns because you can spend lots and lots of money, but short of buying actual media outlets in the district, it reaches saturation point. There's only so many Facebook ads, so many mailers, so much you can do.
But the statistics don't lie.
Okay.
For
I'll tell you
one-
what. There's going to be a change in the making. I guess we agree with that. We need to have another
Indeed.
show just on that particular issue. Again,
Absolutely.
this has been great. Drew, awesome. Scott, as usual, awesome aspect of it. Good luck on the campaign aspect of it.
Well, thank you very much.
To the recorder, the new recorder guy, maintain your
The guy
relationship
making a difference
and
today.
maintain your relationship with the legislature. I
local-
like that idea. Okay, fine,
Yeah.
guys, this has been great. Really appreciate that. Okay, good. And for you viewing audience, hey, I hope you like the show. Tell your friends. Tune in. Oregon Voters Digest. We're going to have an excellent show next week. I won't tell you who the guest is. Let's get there. See you next week. Have a good one. Hey folks, thanks for watching. But now I need to ask you a favor. Is there a topic you want to hear more about? Get on that social media and send me a message. On YouTube, write a comment below the video. Give me a thumbs up if you like it, or a thumbs down if you didn't. And click subscribe. You can also post a message on our Facebook page at facebook.com//Oregon Voter Digest. I love you folks, and I'll see you next week. Take care.